Today, Ryan and I are going to give you a preview of a game called CoExist. Unlike the bumper sticker on everyone's car, this one is about animals. This is going to be, the goal here is to get animals and release them back into the wild.
Yeah.
But we might not be able to release all of them back into the wild, but no animals will be harmed in this game for sure.
Yeah, the entire idea of the game revolves around you running your own conservation center, and you're going to have a board that represents your conservation center. And this board is going to be useful in a few different ways. For one, right at the start of the game, every board is slightly asymmetric. You're going to have a slightly different power, and those powers are usually just like something that's going to score at the end of the game, and it's going to score in a different way. But also, I think what makes this game unique is that the deck that you have of cards is actually made up of the colors of the players that are playing. So when you're choosing your conservation board, and in a two-player game like we have blue and yellow, you play with a deck of blue and yellow cards. So right off the bat, you know, you're going to be coexisting with other players based on the colors of your different boards.
Yeah, and those cards, each color is comprised of caretaker cards and animal cards. As you can see out here on the main board, we've got some animal cards, and then here is an example of a caretaker card, and over here in the discard pile, we have another. These are going to be things you're taking to take care of your animals and try to nurture them back to a point where you can get them out into the wild. Down here are those player boards that Ryan was talking about, and there's a couple areas here. We've got these center spaces. These center spaces are not only where you're going to hold your animals, but it's also going to be where you hold your resources. So this is a resource management game, and it's not as simple as just collecting your resources beside your board and then spending them with maximum flexibility. You actually have to have spaces to put your resources. And so for instance, I have a green one here. I can have up to 2 more resources, but they all have to be of the same color. And that goes for all of these spaces. Now, as you can imagine, over time, if I have multiple animals that I'm working on down here, I have much more limited space for those resources. So it becomes a bit of a game in and of itself to just try to navigate collecting the resources and getting them assigned to the animals.
Yeah, and a big part of that is the structure and the order in which you take your turn. So this is definitely, although it might appear like a pretty easy game of just taking cards, taking resources, spending those resources, you have to do things in a very smart order. You have to really think ahead because of the way you're taking these actions. Because to start, you're going to be choosing just one set of actions to take on your turn. I'll talk about the first one, the mission action. This is maybe the most forward-thinking and obvious, is you're just taking cards from this row here, and you're taking either type of card. You're either taking resource cards, in which case you can take all the resource cards that you can fit, but like David said, there has to be space for them. So if I'm in a situation right here, I can take the orange resource and I can fit it, but I could not take a purple or green right now. Or you can take animal cards, and again, in my situation, I wouldn't be able to. But the way you're taking animal cards is interesting. And each animal has like a rating in the upper right-hand corner.
Yes, that's their capture value.
Yeah, the capture value. And you have a limit. At the start of the game, you can capture up to 10 capture value worth of animals. And you're going to be looking at that number, and you can take any combination as long as it equals 10. Now, you'll notice that I've put some little tokens, survival tokens down, covering mine. So my ability, I can only take up to 9. Now, you don't want to have these survival tokens, but they are a byproduct of a different action that you're going to be taking in the game.
Yeah, while we're talking about survival tokens, those are very much related to your reputation track down here. Your reputation track is going to have impact on your capture value, as well as some points you can score at the end of the game. So like Ryan said, as you take these survival tokens, you get a lot of them, you're going to have a hard time capturing animals. You're also going to have a hard time scoring a lot more points at the end of the game. But like Ryan just alluded to, they can come into play because the second action, or the other thing you can do on your turn, is the conservation center action. This is the one where you're going to do a lot of things. There's 3 different things you can do. You can do them in any order and as many times as you want. One of those things is to rearrange your caretaker tokens onto your animals, into your spaces, etc. and so forth. This is literally the time when you're going to take the caretaker tokens and put them on your animals. When you take tokens, when you take that earlier action, you can't just put them on your animals. You have to put them in the storage spaces. So this is more of the complicated process of going through this game and getting these animals back into the wild. But you can put tokens on the animals. At the end of this action, if you have any tokens that can't go anywhere, you have to get rid of them. But another thing you can do is actually put an animal back into the wild. Now, if you take a look at the bottom of an animal card, there are effectively 2 rows of resources. There's a dark shaded one and a light shaded one. Those have 2 different purposes, again, both for this part of the game. But the ones on the top, the darker shaded ones, are the ones you need in order to put it back into the wild. When you do that, you're going to give the resources back and simply put it under your player board. Now, the power in the upper left-hand corner is going to be active. Sometimes that's an instant ability, sometimes it's an ongoing ability. This allows you to kind of get a little bit of an engine going. Yeah. Sometimes it'll say, hey, at the beginning of your turn, take this color resource, or you have a better rate of exchange when you trade resources, which is a whole nother action. Now, the other resources at the bottom of an animal card are the resources you can get from the third thing you can do during this part of the game.
Yeah, and this is to basically admit that you can't take care of this animal.
No.
You can send the animal, what they call, like, to a different or bigger center.
Yeah,
effectively,
the common center.
Yeah, effectively, you're removing it from the game. You're saying, I can't handle it. You're going to get a lot of resources back, but this is also, if you see on those cards, this is where you're going to get those survival tokens. So the more that you send the animals out without releasing them to the wild, your reputation goes down. People are like, well, you're sending us a lot of animals. You're not taking very good care of them. However, this is a way to get a significant amount of resources at once. And this is the one part of the game where they give you a little bit of freedom from the restrictions.
Yes.
Because when you do that, when you send an animal back, you can rearrange your resources freely, but you still have to end your turn with everything legally placed. So anything that's left over, you have to find a spot for, or else it gets discarded. But you don't have to worry about manipulating everything so tightly when you're sending the animal off. This is, I mean, it's kind of encouraged. You're going to have to do this because otherwise you're really only getting resources, like maybe 1 or 2 resources at a time, and it could take a long time to build up. So I think at certain points you're just encouraged to have to do that to get a big set of resources at once, because the only other way to get specific resources you need is by doing the third action, which is the training action.
Yeah, the training action is the third option, and this is where you can effectively take resources that are on your board, not on animals, and trade them. Now, there's some trade rates for all of the different resources, and they kind of have a succession where it goes all the way up to green, which is effectively a wild resource in respect to the rest of the resources.
Yeah.
You can always use a green to do a lower. You can do the lower one to do the lower. That's
for training. You
for
can't
training.
Spend them as wilds.
No, you can't spend them as wilds. But while you're training, you can basically turn some of them on the high end of the spectrum to any of them on the low end of the spectrum, and vice versa. You can trade 2 of lower ones to go up a rung higher.
Yeah, and it's nice they printed it on the back of every single card, so you can see, like, orange is considered the weakest and green being the strongest, and then you have your survival there as well. And again, you're going to have to train because these resources, this is also kind of a rarity system. The green resources are a lot harder to find. If you can get a lot of them, like David said, it's great because you can trade them down. But more often than not, you're looking at, like, trading some of the lesser resources for the higher ones. You trade 2 orange for a blue, 2 blue for a purple. It's a bit of a process. And again, you're doing that within the context of having to have enough space. So while the game might seem lighter in what you're doing, that planning aspect can add a little complication to that.
Yeah, and with that said, though, while it is a little bit more complicated of a process than you might expect, it's still a pretty snappy game.
Sure,
You are
very
going to
quick
find
turns.
all the resources you'll ever want on these cards, but in most cases, like Ryan was alluding to, as you can see here, the green ones, when you send these animals back, there's very rare, if ever, are you going to get more than 1 green.
Maybe 2.
Whereas sometimes you can get 3 survival tokens, which isn't great, but that's because you're also taking 2 orange, 2 blue. You're a lot of resources there.
It's kind of balanced for when you're sending them off to the common center. It's kind of balances to what you get, the more resources you're getting. And you're also going to find these on some of the higher victory point cards are going to give you more of those survival tokens. But you can't say no to getting that many resources at once feels really good. And that's the way you're trying to do these animals, because the game ends when you send out 5 animals to the wild.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to be worried about 20 animals. Like, you're focused on getting 5 out. If you could do that, that's pretty good.
Yeah, as soon as one player has 5 animals, that's going to trigger the end of the game. You make sure everyone has this equal number of turns throughout the game. The other way it can end is if you actually run out of cards in the main deck, which I think could possibly happen. It just depends on what kind of rhythm one of the players gets in at the table in terms of being able to get the right animals, get the right resources, because you can find some of those efficiency grooves, if you will,
Well, yeah.
to get things going.
And you mentioned it earlier when you said combos, and I think that's a big part of the game that's hard to kind of showcase in a video like this. But because all of these animals have different powers, you might find yourself in a groove like David alluded to earlier. Maybe you have one that gives you an orange every turn, and then you have another one that says you can turn an orange into a green. So now you see you're starting to get that groove going. But there are a wide variety. I think every card in this deck is unique, also featuring a huge amount of unique artwork as well.
Yeah, the artwork is from an artist named Amo that does, if you've ever seen these really nice murals of animals on walls,
he's like a
city
graffiti
streets.
artist.
He's a graffiti artist. These will be very recognizable. It is that same style, same artist. So that is CoExist. If you have any questions at all about it, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.